Welcome to Silent Queen's Rise. Now, let's get into the story. Thaddeus Hargrove stood in the center of his family's mahogany-paneled dining room, the one his mother had called the heart of this family for 40 years, and told his wife of 11 years that she was no longer welcome at the table. He did not lower his voice. He did not pull her aside. He said it in front of his mother, his brother's new fiancée, and the 12 dinner guests they had invited to celebrate the Hargrove family's annual legacy dinner. He said it clearly, the way he announced everything, like a man who had never once been told no. "Josephine, you're making a scene. I think it's best if you go wait in the car." Josephine Hargrove did not move, not immediately. She stood at the head of the long table, still holding the cream envelope that had arrived that afternoon, the one Thaddeus had tried to intercept at the door and failed. Her fingers were perfectly still against the ivory paper. The dining room smelled of roasted lamb and beeswax candles, and the particular kind of old money that believed its own mythology, so completely it had forgotten how money actually worked. Josephine looked at her husband. She looked at her mother-in-law, Rosalind, seated at the opposite head of the table in a raw silk blazer the color of champagne, who was looking down at her water glass as though it had become suddenly fascinating. She looked at her brother-in-law, Barrett, who was smirking behind his wine glass with the easy cruelty of a man who had been waiting 11 years for this exact moment. Then she set the envelope gently on the white linen tablecloth in front of Thaddeus's empty chair. "No," she said, "I don't think I will." What she did not say, what no one in that room knew, what Thaddeus had spent 11 years never bothering to find out, was that the envelope contained a quarterly statement, a statement from the blind trust that quietly owned the majority stake in Hargrove Capital Partners, the investment firm that bore the family's name, that had funded Rosalind's dining room renovations and Barrett's failed bourbon venture, and Thaddeus's entire career. The trust that Josephine had established and controlled since she was 26 years old, 3 years before she ever set foot in this house. She looked at her husband one more time. "I'll stay for dessert," she said, and pulled out her chair and sat down. To understand what Josephine did next, you have to understand what Josephine had spent 11 years pretending not to be. She had grown up in Raleigh, North Carolina, the second of 3 daughters born to Franklin Whitmore, a man whose name did not appear on any billionaire list and had been carefully, deliberately kept off everyone. Franklin Whitmore was the kind of wealthy that did not need to be seen, the kind accumulated over 3 generations in commercial real estate, private equity, and a series of infrastructure investments, so quietly profitable that his accountants sometimes forgot to add a column. He had exactly 2 beliefs about money: that it was a tool, not an identity, and that the people who used it as an identity were the easiest people in the world to manipulate. He had raised his daughters accordingly. Josephine had met Thaddeus Hargrove at a charity gala in Raleigh when she was 28. She had been attending as a representative of the Whitmore Family Foundation, her name listed on the program under a title she had fabricated herself: Development Coordinator. Thaddeus had been attending as himself, which was to say with the volume and confidence of a man whose family had run a mid-sized investment firm for 2 generations, and genuinely believed that made them titans. He had seen her across the room, a woman in a simple navy dress, no visible jewelry, speaking quietly to an older couple in the corner, and decided with the instinctive radar of a certain kind of man that she was attainable, not impressive. Attainable. He had pursued her with the energy of someone who mistakes acquisition for courtship. Josephine had said yes because she was tired. She had spent her 20s watching men perform wealth at her, and Thaddeus, at least, had made her laugh twice in one evening. She had thought, with the particular optimism of a woman who has never needed anything from anyone, that the rest could be worked out. It couldn't, as it turned out. But she had tried. For 11 years she had played the role Thaddeus needed her to play. She dressed carefully but not expensively. She attended his family's dinners and smiled through Rosalind's subtle corrections and Barrett's open condescension. She managed their household with quiet efficiency and donated her own money to causes she believed in through channels Thaddeus never thought to examine. She had agreed, early in their marriage, to let Thaddeus manage their joint finances, a concession she made not from weakness, but because she had her own accounts, her own trust, her own infrastructure, and she simply did not care about the joint account enough to fight over it. What she had not anticipated was that Thaddeus would interpret her disinterest as ignorance. He had spent 11 years believing he was the financial mind of the household. He took a great deal of private satisfaction in this. He referenced it in arguments. He used it to justify decisions he made without consulting her. He had, over the past year, begun funneling money from their joint savings toward a real estate development project. He was running secretly with Barrett, a project Josephine had found out about 4 months ago, not because she'd been snooping, but because her family's attorneys had flagged it in a routine review of entities that might intersect with Whitmore Holdings. She had sat with that information for 4 months. She had said nothing. She had simply been watching, the way her father had taught her to watch, waiting for the moment when Thaddeus's confidence would stretch itself past the point of return. That moment had arrived tonight. He had asked her to wait in the car in front of 12 people, because she had picked up a piece of mail that was addressed to her name. Josephine poured herself a glass of Bordeaux, set the bottle down with a small, precise click, and sent a text message under the table. The text went to a woman named Cordelia Fitch. Cordelia Fitch was not Josephine's friend, exactly. She was something more useful. She was the woman Franklin Whitmore had hired 30 years ago to protect his family's money, and had subsequently been unable to replace because no one else had ever done it as well. She was 61 years old, had a law degree from Columbia and a master's in forensic accounting from Chicago, and managed a team of 22 specialists who operated out of a nondescript office building in Charlotte. Her personal phone had one ringtone, reserved for the Whitmore family, that played no sound. It only vibrated 3 times like a knock. Josephine's text said 4 words: full review. Tonight. Authorization granted. Across the dinner table, Rosalind had recovered her composure and was guiding the conversation toward a topic she found safer: the renovation of the lake house. Barrett was refilling his own wine glass for the 4th time. His fiancée, a 25-year-old named Kelsey, who seemed genuinely kind and therefore completely wrong for Barrett, was asking the woman beside her about her garden. Thaddeus was watching Josephine the way he always watched her when she declined to perform the emotion he expected, with irritation that had not yet sharpened into strategy. "The statements come to the house address," Josephine said mildly, across the table as though continuing a conversation they hadn't finished. "That's why I opened it." "We can discuss this later," Thaddeus said. His jaw was tight. "Of course," Josephine said, and smiled at Kelsey. "Tell me about the wedding venue." "Barrett mentioned somewhere in the mountains?" Dinner continued. Josephine ate her lamb, complimented the wine, listened to Rosalind describe the lake house plans in extraordinary detail, and said nothing else of consequence for the next hour and 40 minutes. At 9:47, while Rosalind was serving the dessert she had spent considerable effort explaining, a salted caramel tart from a bakery in Asheville, she treated as a personal discovery. Josephine's phone vibrated once in her jacket pocket. It was Cordelia. "Initial audit complete. Confirming unauthorized transfers from Hargrove Capital Partners operating account to private LLC, registered to Barrett Hargrove and Thaddeus Hargrove jointly. Total, 14M over 14 months. Routed through Delaware entity, Lakeview Meridian LLC. Audit trail is clean. Your name appears nowhere. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2. Confirm?" Josephine read the message with the same expression she used when reviewing a restaurant menu. She typed back, "Confirm. Proceed." She set her phone face down on her knee and accepted a slice of the salted caramel tart. "This is wonderful, Rosalind," she said. And she meant it. It was a very good tart. What happened over the next 72 hours was not dramatic in the way Thaddeus would have understood drama. There were no raised voices. There were no confrontations. There were no moments designed for an audience. There was simply Cordelia Fitch and her 22-person team doing what they had been retained to do. By midnight, they had completed a full forensic accounting of Hargrove Capital Partners operating funds for the previous 18 months. By 2 in the morning, they had cross-referenced the transfers against Barrett and Thaddeus's personal accounts and confirmed the paper trail. By 4 a.m., the documentation had been assembled into a formal report and delivered to 3 separate attorneys, one in Raleigh, one in Charlotte, one in Washington, D.C., for review and signature. By 7 a.m., the Hargrove Capital Partners majority stakeholder, a blind administered through a Charlotte holding company that no one at the firm had ever thought to examine too closely, had formally notified the firm's board of directors of a material concern requiring immediate investigation. That notification arrived in the email inboxes of the board's 5 independent directors at 7:14 in the morning. Thaddeus was still asleep. Josephine was in the kitchen of their Raleigh home, drinking coffee and reading the news on her tablet, when he came downstairs at 8:30. He was in his weekend clothes, a fleece pullover and khakis, and he walked to the coffee maker with the casual ease of a man who had spent 11 years convinced that unpleasantness, when it came, would come at his invitation and on his schedule. "About last night," he started. "You humiliated me in front of 12 people," Josephine said pleasantly. "But we can get to that." He paused. "I was protecting the family's business from—" "Your phone is about to ring," Josephine said. Thaddeus looked at her. His phone rang. It was Gordon Alcott, the chairman of Hargrove Capital Partners Board. Thaddeus answered it with the automatic confidence of a man who had never received a call from his board chairman at 8:30 on a Saturday morning that was anything other than social. Josephine watched him listen. She watched the conference leave his face the way water drains from a basin, not all at once, but steadily, completely, until there was nothing left. She watched him turn away from her and walk to the window. She heard him say, "That's not possible," and then, "There must be a mistake," and then, much more quietly, "Who initiated the audit?" She poured herself a second cup of coffee. He hung up and turned around. His face had the particular gray quality of a man whose internal architecture has just been condemned. "What did you do?" he said. "I opened my mail," Josephine said. "Like I told you." "That statement, the quarterly report, is from the Whitmore Family Trust," Josephine said, "which, through a series of holding companies you never asked about, controls approximately 63% of the voting shares in Hargrove Capital Partners." She let that settle. "Your grandfather accepted an infusion of private capital in 1987 to keep the firm solvent after the crash. My grandmother provided it through an entity that did not carry our name because she preferred it that way. The arrangement has continued in various forms ever since." Thaddeus stared at her. "You've been the majority stakeholder," he said. The words came out stripped of everything: the authority, the performance, the assumption. Just the naked arithmetic of what he had spent 11 years not knowing. "My family has," Josephine said. "I took direct administrative control of the trust when I turned 31, 3 years before we got married." "You never said. You never asked," Josephine said. "You decided who I was within about 40 minutes of meeting me, and you spent 11 years being very comfortable with that decision." She set her coffee cup down. "Last night you told me to wait in the car, in your mother's dining room, in front of people we've known for a decade." She looked at him without anger and without performance. "That was the last time you'll make that kind of decision without consequences." She picked up her phone and placed a call. She did not leave the room to make it. "Cordelia." "Yes. Go ahead and proceed with the formal referral." A pause. "Both names, yes. And please contact the family's attorney about the dissolution filing we discussed." Another pause. "Thank you." She hung up. Thaddeus had not moved from the window. "Dissolution? You mean divorce? The firm's legal team will be in contact with you Monday morning," Josephine said. "Given the nature of the audit findings, the board will be moving to restrict your access to operating accounts effective today. Barrett's as well." "You're destroying the firm," Thaddeus said. The gray had shifted into something more desperate. "I'm protecting the firm," Josephine said, "from the people who were stealing from it." She picked up her tablet and returned to the article she had been reading. "The firm will be fine. It's been fine for 37 years. It will continue to be fine after this. Where am I supposed to go?" The question came out smaller than he intended. Josephine looked up. She considered him. This man she had cooked for and traveled with, and defended quietly to her own family for 11 years. This man who had told her to wait in the car. "I'll be in touch through my attorney," she said. "I'd recommend getting one of your own before Monday." She returned to her tablet. Thaddeus stood in his own kitchen in his fleece pullover and did not move for a long time. The sound of the house, its heating system, a neighbor's lawnmower distantly, the refrigerator's low hum, filled the silence he had left behind. Barrett Hargrove found out at 9:15 that same morning, when his own phone rang, and did not take it as gracefully as his brother. He called Josephine's number 6 times in the next 2 hours. She did not answer. The 7th call she sent to voicemail. She sent the voicemail unheard, directly to Cordelia's office. Rosalind Hargrove called at 11. Josephine answered that one. "I don't understand," Rosalind said. Her voice had the slightly airless quality of a woman in her late 60s who has been told something that restructures her understanding of the past 40 years. "The trust has always been. We always assumed it was an outside investor." "It was," Josephine said. "My family. We're outside." "You should have told us," Rosalind said. Then, more quietly, "He would have treated you differently." Josephine was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. "I didn't." The lake house, it turned out, had been purchased 3 years earlier through a line of credit Barrett had taken against projected firm earnings that had not, in fact, materialized. It was one of 11 financial irregularities Cordelia's team documented in their formal report. The report was 43 pages long and extremely thorough, as Cordelia's reports tended to be. The real estate development project, Lakeview Meridian LLC, had been capitalized with $1.4 million in unauthorized withdrawals from Hargrove Capital Partners' operating accounts. The project itself was, to no one's particular surprise, not performing well. The projected returns Barrett had presented to Thaddeus in a private PowerPoint in the library of this very house were not projections so much as wishes presented in graph form. Neither Thaddeus nor Barrett had any experience in real estate development. They had proceeded anyway, because they were the kind of men who confused confidence with competence, and had spent their lives in an environment that rarely corrected the confusion. On Monday morning, Hargrove Capital Partners Board voted unanimously to engage an independent management team pending a full restructuring review. Thaddeus's access badge stopped working at 8 o'clock. Barrett's had been deactivated Sunday night. By Tuesday, the story had reached the financial press in a carefully worded statement from the firm's new interim communications director. The statement did not mention Josephine by name. It did not need to. Josephine spent that Tuesday having lunch with her younger sister, Margot, at a restaurant in downtown Raleigh they had been going to since college. She ordered the soup and the salad and ate both, and told Margot the whole story, and Margot listened without interrupting until the very end. "You sat on this for 4 months, Margot said. "I needed to be certain," Josephine said. "And the dinner? The thing with the car that was—" Josephine paused, turning her water glass slowly on the table. "I'd been watching him for 4 months, knowing what I knew, and I kept thinking, maybe it won't come to this. Maybe he'll do something that changes the math." She looked up. "He asked me to wait in the car." Margot nodded slowly. "So that was it. That was it." Her sister reached across the table and put her hand briefly over Josephine's. "How are you actually doing?" Josephine thought about it honestly, the way she did most things. 11 years was not nothing. There had been good years inside the bad ones. There had been a version of Thaddeus, very early, who had made her laugh and meant it. There was grief in this, underneath the precision and the process. She would not pretend otherwise. "I'm okay," she said. "I will be." Margot squeezed her hand and let go. "Dad wants to fly in. Tell him I'm handling it. He knows you're handling it. He just wants to see you." Josephine smiled, and for the first time in several days, it felt completely real. "Tell him to bring the dogs." 3 weeks later, a woman Josephine had never met sent her a message through the firm's investor portal. Her name was Kelsey, Barrett's fiancée. The engagement, it turned out, had not survived the week. "I don't know if this is the right way to reach you," the message read. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened at the dinner. I didn't understand what I was walking into. I don't think I understood a lot of things about that family until very recently. I hope you're doing okay." Josephine read it twice. She wrote back, "Thank you for reaching out. None of that was your fault. I hope you're okay too." She paused, then added, "For what it's worth, I thought you seemed like the kind of person who deserves better than what you were getting. I hope you find it." She sent it, and closed the portal and poured herself a glass of wine, and sat on the back porch of the house she had grown up visiting on weekends. In the early spring evening air, listening to her father's 2 yellow labs chase something real or imagined across the back lawn. For 11 years, she had made herself smaller to fit inside someone else's idea of who she was. She had cooked the dinners and learned the family history, and laughed at the right moments, and let a man who had never read a single line of her actual financial statements believe that he understood the dimensions of her life. She had done it. She was honest enough to admit, partly for the wrong reasons, because she was tired, because she had wanted to believe it could work, because love is not always wise even when it is genuine. But she had also done it because her father had raised her to believe that real power does not need to perform itself. It does not announce its presence. It does not slam doors or raise its voice or demand acknowledgement. It simply exists, clear-eyed and patient and absolute, and when the moment comes, it moves. The dogs came bounding back across the lawn, breathless and ridiculous, and deeply pleased with themselves. Josephine reached down and scratched behind the ears of the one who pushed his enormous head into her knee, and finished her wine, and watched the last of the light go out of the Carolina sky.